This one hurts, guys. It hurts real fucking bad. I love Tron so much. While Legacy was the film that made me fall in love with Tron, rewatching the original 1982 film in preparation for Ares made me appreciate it even more. Sure, the technical constraints of the time caused issues with the connective tissue, but as a cutting-edge Star Wars knockoff, hey, it mostly works. The genius is in how it uses the language of video games, perfect systems operating within rigid structures with the promise of winning, only to reveal it's unwinnable, to critique corporate structure within 80s capitalism. The promise of wealth, status, and endless possibilities dangled as motivation for actual artisans to innovate and create the impossible, only for the suits to step in and exploit it for profit without care for the creator. Stolen ideas, over-reliance on automation, exploitation of genius, paving the way for authoritarian takeover. These are great ideas that don't entirely ring as powerfully as they should, but as a piece about the strength of the worker facing corporate overlords, it's not bad. When it comes to Tron Legacy, well, I mean, I've made a video gushing about why it's a perfect film, and you should definitely check that one out. It was instrumental in my love of cinema, with this intersection of electronic music, groundbreaking visuals, and a story of creators and creation that hits pretty close to home. If our creations, our pure idealistic dreams are to be reinterpreted, reappropriated, and re-examined over time, then perhaps the greatest legacy we can leave behind is found in those closest to us, our children and loved ones who will carry the spirit of our work and lives into a new dawn, perfectly imperfect systems. I even remember the Flynn Lives Blu-ray feature, this 10-minute short film that filled in the backstory between Tron and Tron Legacy, and also chronicling the viral Flynn Lives campaign, the 1989 massive movement that followed the unexplained disappearance of Kevin Flynn. In addition to bridging the gap between Tron and Tron Legacy, it also touches on Sam's return from the grid following the events of Tron Legacy, and it also reveals that Roy Kleinberg, the guy who wrote the program RAM in the original Tron, was actually a co-founder of the Flynn Lives movement and was interacting with Alan Bradley throughout the process, and it touches on what happens with Bradley following the end of Tron Legacy. Like, there's just so many cool little bits that linked both those films together that alluded to where the future of Tron could go. I watched this short film over and over because I was obsessed with Tron at the time, and I was searching for Easter eggs that would allude to Kosinski's Tron 3, aka Tron Ascension. There was a promising and exciting future awaiting Tron fans that was sadly taken away when Disney axed Tron 3 following Tomorrowland. And then, eventually, well, yeah, we got Tron Aries. Look, I wanted to love Tron Aries. Tron Legacy sits in my top 10 films of all time. I've been waiting for a sequel every day since Joseph Kosinski's masterpiece dropped back in 2010. When they announced a new Tron movie, I was stoked. Even with the announcement that it wouldn't really be a sequel to Legacy, I thought, you know what? Fine. It's been long enough. Maybe it could work as its own thing, but alas, the monkey's paw had to curl. Tron Aries is a vapid dud of a movie. It's even impossible to enjoy as a vibes-only experience, as it doesn't have the patience to luxuriate in the vibes. It's a schizophrenically paced, exposition-plagued, Frankenstein'd attempt to repurpose a Tron Legacy sequel with entirely too many moving parts. A clown car's worth of characters, not enough real estate devoted to allowing us to connect with those characters or its trite ideas to resonate. It all feels like a direct-to-DVD in-between-quel, unsure of whether to soft reboot or continue the story of Legacy. What makes Aries even worse is that it's such a superficial slap in the face to everything fans love about Tron. We waited 15 years for Tron 3, and it mostly ignores the dangling threads and the cultural impact of Tron Legacy, the very film that created a new generation of Tron fans, in favor of pandering to, Gen Xers with nostalgia for the original. And I say this as someone who likes the original. Let's unpack this mess. First and foremost, this movie screams development hell. You can see the seams where different versions got stitched together over 15 years, and it has never been more obvious that Sam Flynn was the protagonist of this story for a very long time. Eve Kim, Greta Lee's character, is just Sam Flynn with a dead sister instead of a dead dad. There's literally a scene where someone yells to Eve,
you've done a great thing.
And she responds,
Tess did a great thing.
That's a scene written for Sam to say, no, no, my dad did it. They didn't even bother rewriting the dialogue properly. They just kind of swapped around nouns and called it done. Eve's sister's obsession with Kevin Flynn also makes zero sense, and it's not really given the time to have any emotional impact. Yeah, we get it. Kevin Flynn was like the Steve Jobs of the time, and so there were a lot of people who probably really dug his work, and there's some Flynn Lives stuff hanging up on the wall, but we don't actually understand why Eve's sister thought Kevin was such a genius and why she was moved by his work in a way to become an innovator the way that she was. The movie never addresses it because in an earlier draft, this wasn't some random woman. This was Sam talking about his father. The film keeps operating like we already know these characters, understand their relationships and motivations, because in a previous version, we did. But now, they're strangers and the movie never properly introduces them. Sam gets dismissed in an opening newsreel montage. He just left NCOM for personal reasons. I guess if you couldn't get Garrett Hedlund back for this film, sure, that's a way to do it, but it just also doesn't feel like something Sam would do. At the end of Tron Legacy, he literally has a line that says,
"I'm taking the company back, Alan."
Referring to the fact that everything he just learned about his father in the grid and what he was trying to do in terms of making people's lives better, he understood that he was in a position of power and that he had someone in Korra who could help save humanity, save them from destroying themselves and help people live longer and healthier lives. Alan Bradley was literally given control of NCOM's board at the end of Legacy by Sam, and he just doesn't exist here. Sam literally says,
"You're chairman now."
And now, in Tron Aries, nothing. Bruce Boxleitner, the guy who plays Tron in a movie called Tron, isn't in it. He doesn't have to be a major player. Even if you have to write around Sam, why isn't Alan here? I mentioned the Flynn Lives the Day After short at the top. Well, Bruce Boxleitner was in them. Garrett Hedlund was in them. They were talking about this cultural movement where people believed in Flynn and believed he was still alive. It was just a 10-minute short, and we got more into the state of the world and these people and why they were so enamored with Flynn and why they believed in him. This was a Blu-ray featurette. It wasn't like this theatrically released thing. How are you expecting people to understand the state of the world and this Flynn Lives movement if you've never addressed it in a feature film? Tron Legacy gave you the perfect opportunity to explore all of this, to explore Flynn's cultural impact and how Sam is going to carry on that legacy in a future film. Sam made public appearances in this short with a shirt that said Flynn Lives. Seeing all that Flynn Lives imagery on the walls in the beginning of Aries is interesting because it alludes to the fact that, hey, maybe this film is going to address this big cultural moment, but it's directly tied to characters who aren't in this movie. It's like they kept all the window dressing but removed the people it was actually about. For a movie that has entirely too much exposition, we don't really understand the state of the world in these movements on a person-to-person level and what motivates everyone. There's some cool corporate espionage stuff, specifically during the Space Paranoids launch, where we can actually see what someone hacking into another person's mainframe would look like and them stealing the information. It was cool to see that play out, but that's one scene, and that's really just one instance of these two competing companies that are more interested in their own self-preservation than actually doing anything to benefit humanity, which would have made for an interesting scenario where you have a Sam Flynn who is actively trying to use this tech his father uncovered in order to make the world a better place, and you have these two competing corporations and stuff. It's just another idea, another route they could have gone down that they don't. I mean, this film is clearly meant to be Flynn versus Dillinger. That's been the rivalry across the entire series. Two families representing different ideologies in terms of our relationship with technology. Legacy teased this, but, you know, a proper Tron 3 would have brought it to a head. Instead, they just kind of palette swapped one family, the Flynns, with the Kims, who basically represent the same ideology as the Flynns, and it winds up creating this weird redundancy where you have two families who are essentially the same people, but the Kims mean nothing to me. It reminds me of The Rise of Skywalker. You can feel them jumping through hoops, trying to fix things in the margins rather than just rewriting the script. Sometimes you need to throw the baby out with the bathwater, especially when you've been working on something for 15 years and your lead actor won't come back. But they didn't. They just did find and replace on the character names, and it really shows. Tron Ares revolves around finding a code that lets programs exist in our world for more than in 29 minutes. This is the central plot. Both heroes and villains need this permanence code. Everything hinges on this MacGuffin hunt. But why? This is such a fundamental mistake. You got all these big ideas about AI, humanity, creation, and control, but your actual plot is about solving a logistical problem? The movie spends so much narrative real estate on this code, and it leaves all the bigger ideas feeling surface level because the actual thrust of the plot has nothing to do with them. Both the good plan and the bad plan are contingent on getting this code to work. What's the metaphor here? How does this connect to anything? It doesn't. It's just busy work. The film can't even take a coherent stance on AI. For a movie released in 2025, when AI is the biggest technological and philosophical conversation happening, Tron Ares has absolutely nothing to say. Actually, it's worse. It offers this grossly defeatist shrug and kind of props up AI in a sense. Dillinger gives this speech about how AI is already here, so we might as well use it. While he's obviously the villain of the film and what he's saying is supposed to be wrong, I think there's an interesting thing to discuss about the fact that people have already just accepted the fact that AI is here instead of trying to combat it. The idea that, oh, well, the genie's out of the bottle, so, oh well. This is an attitude that I think a lot of people have. They've just kind of accepted AI and the damage it's done on our society and economy, and sort of like, well, whatever, there's nothing we can really do about it. Julian Dillinger could have been a compelling villain, someone who shares the ideology that I think a lot of people today share, but the film isn't interested in trying to challenge that ideology and proving it wrong. It's just kind of like he wants to make weapons instead of using AI for more productive purposes. It's just like, yeah, I mean, using AI to 3D print weapons is something that I think a lot of people can disagree with, but it doesn't actually get to the core roots of the dilemma here. It doesn't address the idea that people are just accepting AI into their lives. Even the good guys don't fare much better. Eve's sister wants to use AI for therapy and medicine, which sounds great on paper. They mention using it to grow crops in climate-adverse regions, to solve resource scarcity. But again, we don't really understand the state of the world. We don't understand these dire circumstances we're living in and why something like this is necessary, why we've now resorted to AI to solve these issues. This could be an interesting idea, but the movie doesn't know what it's actually about. It's just using AI as a proxy for general scientific advancement. And then the Aries story is explicitly an AI story about sentience and consciousness. These two things just don't mesh, and the movie doesn't even try to make them connect. It just rushes past the conflict. There's even a moment here where it feels like it might go pro-AI. And look, as disgusting and off-putting as that would have been, at least it would have been something. But no, it can't even commit to being wrong. It just kind of throws up its hands with this defeatist attitude of like, whatever, these ideas, these philosophical ideas, nah, who cares, man? It's all about who controls it, the good guys and the bad guys. That's your take on the defining technological issue of our time, not the actual philosophy behind its existence and what it says about us. But don't worry, 9 Inch Nails is here to save the day. Or at least so I and many other people thought. Look, who doesn't love 9 Inch Nails? They're the poster boys of the marketing for a reason. And let me be clear, the 9 Inch Nails soundtrack is good. It's really good. But it's good in the way that like an instrumental 9 Inch Nails album is good. Not the way a film score should be good. As excited as I was for 9 Inch Nails to score Tron Aries, the idea of getting them to score the next Tron film because Daft Punk, another experimental electronic group, weren't available feels a bit cynical to me. The insincerity in trying to capture the passion and magic of Kosinski and Daft Punk rubbed me the wrong way from the jump, because it didn't feel like 9 Inch Nails was selected because the filmmaker had an inspired vision for the sound palette of the film. They were selected because they're a popular band who also happens to have experience scoring films and thus could capitalize on the band name instead of just having the score be Reznor and Ross. It's just nothing but marketing brain decisions. Kosinski got Daft Punk because he listened to their music in pre-production, he had a passion for their sound palette. It was this organic and authentic process of bringing them in and making them craft these beautiful suites to match the stunning visuals that he was putting on screen. And after watching the film, I only feel more vindicated in feeling this way. The music feels completely disconnected from what's happening on screen. It's like watching a stock movie-themed music video where the visuals are just accompaniment to the music rather than the music enhancing the scene. And it's constant. Every action scene feels like a montage where I'm just watching pretty pictures while music plays. There's no excitement, no tension, just the wall of sound that gives the illusion of atmosphere. This is a horrible misinterpretation of why the Daft Punk score worked. Daft Punk understood they were making a film score. There were orchestrations, motifs, quiet moments. When the club bangers hit, like End of Line or Derez, they hit because they were earned. The rest was very Tangerine Dream-esque synth orchestrations with beautiful melodies. The music knew when to pull back, when to breathe, and when to explode. Reznor and Ross, I mean, they're two of the best composers in the business today, and they're absolutely capable of that. Their other scores prove it. But here, it feels like they just made a bunch of Nine Inch Nails tracks, removed the vocals, and slotted them in without any consideration for what was happening on screen. They're not telling a story with their music because there's no story to tell. They were clearly just told, hey, you know, just write some music, make it sound Tron-ish, and then did their best with no actual direction. There's no denying that the score does give scenes a sense of presence, but it's a forced presence. When there's nothing else going on in a scene, there's no character development, no meaningful action, no emotional weight, the music becomes the only thing giving it any energy. It felt like Daft Punk were parts of the storytelling process for Legacy. Nine Inch Nails clearly weren't. They were never part of the narrative construction. I think this quote from director Joachim Roning actually sums it up perfectly.
I'm not doing this with them as a score composers to the film. They're doing it as their band. So I very early on felt that I should take more of the back seat than what I usually do.
That's not really the way to do it, man. It's your movie. You gotta figure out which music fits best here and what emotions you're trying to evoke out of a given scene. So much of this is part of my issue with people calling this a vibes-only experience. They're talking about how the story sucks, but hey, don't worry, it's got the vibes. And all I have to say to that is, what vibes? The movie never stops moving long enough to establish any atmosphere. It's so lacking in actual atmosphere that it has to rely entirely on the music to provide any sense of mood, and even that doesn't work because there's no intention behind it. The film doesn't know what atmosphere it's trying to create. It just depends on, whatever Nine Inch Nails decided each track should sound like. You get music paired with vibrant visuals. That inherently has some kind of vibe, I guess, but it's empty, it's surface level, it's vapid. Tron Legacy understood that spectacle needs space to breathe. Remember Sam's arrival at the grid? The slow build entering End of Line? The quiet moments between Sam and his father on the solar sailor? Those pauses let the world sink in, let you feel the weight of this digital frontier. Legacy could luxuriate in its style and in its vibes, establishing a vibey experience. Aries has none of that patience, even when it tries for a meaningful moment. Like Aries talking to Flynn's ghost about what it means to be human. It's a nice thought, at least it's an attempt, but it can't sit long enough to let it land. It has to cut back to the alien invasion destruction porn going on in Vancouver. And it's not like they didn't have a great cinematographer at the helm. Jeff Cronenweth shot this, the man who's lensed practically all of Fincher's films. And yeah, it looks good still to still, but the problem isn't the cinematography, it's the architecture of sequences. It's how Joachim Roning has decided to move the camera, how these sequences are designed and cut together. You can have the best cinematographer in the world, but if your director is just a commercial director hired gun with no vision, if your edit is brutal, if your script has been stitched together over 15 years of rewrites, none of it matters, man. When did we decide to give movies a pass because of great visual effects and a banging score? I mean, where was this curve for Only God Forgives or The Neon Demon or, oh my god, Tenet? A movie looking and sounding good should be the bare minimum. I love a good vibes-only movie, but please, let's have standards. The vibes have to evoke and mean something. What is Aries evoking? What atmosphere does it establish beyond generic synthwave, this sounds Tron-ish? It's superficial slop. Then on top of the frenetic pacing, there's just entirely too many characters and the movie gives none of them room to exist. Hassan Minhaj and the other NCOM characters, not Seth, but the ones that aren't with Eve, they were apparently cast late into the process and it shows. Their characters feel shoved into scenes because someone needed to run NCOM while Eve was off doing the actual plot. They exist purely for plot functionality. And you know what would have been a great way to resolve this? If Eve was the one running NCOM and Sam was the one going off on this quest to try and figure out his father's final plan for allowing someone like Cora to exist in the real world and how she could help make the world a better place. Like, it's just, why are you ignoring Legacy? It solves so many of your problems with this movie. Even the main characters feel thin, and the performances don't help much either. Greta Lee is genuinely terrible in this. Just a downright bad performance. And it's a shame because we know what she's capable of from a film like Past Lives, but she's clearly let down by the writing and lack of direction. She's playing a character that was obviously someone else in a previous draft, with motivations that don't track and relationships that are barely explained. She's acting against nothing because the movie gives her nothing. We know almost nothing about Eve beyond her dead sister. We don't understand their relationship beyond some news clips. The movie seeds this idea that maybe Eve wants to use the technology to reconnect with her sisters somehow, but it never follows through because that thread only exists as a vestige from when it was Sam's story about his father. Sam trying to continue his father's work, continue the legacy, and take what he learned from the grid and apply it to the real world, but still missing his dad and maybe being hopelessly naive to the point where maybe with this permanence code he can bring back his father. That's a really interesting dilemma, and it's one that we understand because we understand what Sam went through from the previous film. With these new characters, we're told this, we don't actually feel it, and it ultimately doesn't go anywhere. Weirdly though, Jared Leto as Ares, which I know is a big concern for people, isn't the biggest problem here. Everything with Ares as a character kind of works. He's good, actually. I say that begrudgingly, but you know what, it's true. His journey toward humanity, his fascination with feeling and music, the Depeche Mode scene where he discovers that art can't be created by machines, that it requires soul. All of that lands fairly well. It's a bit generic, but you know, it's functional, but it lands in isolation, disconnected from everything else going on. And this disconnect goes back to the big frustration that I have, is that they had 15 years to perfect this screenplay. 15 years. There was no desperate cry for a Tron 3, no urgent demand. This was an unforced error. This is an original Disney IP. Why wouldn't the studio be more considerate of that? Why wouldn't you want to make your original IP the best that it can be? Instead, the movie feels lazily written by committee, and you know what? It's because it was. I don't know if you know this, but the writers are in-house producers with limited screenwriting experience. After all this time, they just gave up and forced a hack job. They couldn't even get the Tron Legacy guys back. Do they genuinely have such disdain for this franchise and its impact that they think vibes and a score are enough? That's such a superficial understanding of why Tron and Tron Legacy resonated with people. This is a series about the intersection of capitalism, emerging technologies, ego, and authoritarianism. AI is at the forefront of this conversation right now. There's something interesting about bad actors creating artificial intelligence under the assumption that it'll be subservient, a means to carry out their agenda, ignoring the fact that AI aggregates information and might turn on its creators. It just speaks to the fact that intelligence and subservience don't go hand in hand. Ares kind of understands this, but it never unpacks it. It's implied through embarrassingly on-the-nose newsreels and literal quotes from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, but the connection is never bridged because the film doesn't have the patience to be heady. It never has interesting conversations. Legacy wasn't some highbrow, sophisticated science fiction, but you know, at least Kosinski understood that the philosophical dilemmas of creator and creation, father and son, were the core of the film, and we needed to sit with that. The biggest irony of the whole thing is that this movie preaches about feeling and soul and the intangible components of humanity while displaying none of these qualities itself. You've made the most soulless version of this story while talking about soul. At the end of Tron Legacy, it was teased that the idea of the grid merging with the real world was going to happen in a Tron 3. And that has the potential to be cool. I mean, the idea of the grid merging with the real world should be spectacular. This is the culmination of everything the franchise has been building toward. Legacy teased it with Clara entering our world. This film, Tron Aries, should be the payoff. Instead, we just get 2 light cycles and a recognizer in the least conspicuous depiction of Vancouver imaginable. Was that intentional? Everything feels so small and inconsequential despite the film insisting otherwise. It devolves into generic alien invasion nonsense with the least exciting spectacle imaginable. The grid was special because it was separate, another world with its own rules. It served as a mirror reflecting all of the problems in humanity back at us. It was this Alice in Wonderland kind of fantasy. Now, it's just CGI nonsense happening in a parking lot. I know I've done a lot of complaining here, but I think what's extra frustrating is that you can see the good movie buried within Tron Ares. There are interesting ideas, if you squint. Eve completing her sister's work out of obligation, then finding her own reasons to continue. She starts wanting to solve the permanence problem just to honor her sister, planning to walk away once it's done. But through Ares, she realizes that she's been living for someone else. By the end, she accepts her position at ENCOM because she has some ideas of her own. It's about finding your purpose rather than living for ghosts. Or, in the case of Ares, it's about defying your masters and recognizing your autonomy. That the impermanence of life is what makes it beautiful, what allows you to feel. It should cause you to live for yourself, make the most of your time, and do something that matters. To be generous to the film, you could read Sam's absence the same way. He redirected ENCOM to honor his father's vision, but that wasn't personally fulfilling. So he left for personal reasons to live with Cora, choosing a life that nourishes his soul over corporate obligation. The idea that interpersonal connection is what makes us human, that sometimes you need to live for yourself rather than what others expect. But this reading requires entirely too much generosity toward a film that doesn't really earn it. It only works if Tron 4 happens with Sam and Cora returning, because otherwise their absence feels like a cop-out, and making a movie just to set up another movie is foolish. You rob your core audience of what they came for while delivering half measures that satisfy nobody. Tron Ares isn't the worst movie ever made, but it's horribly dull. A hollow exercise in brand management. A movie that exists because a spreadsheet said it should, not because anyone had a story to tell. It's compromise stacked on compromise, draft piled on draft, until whatever hearts might have existed got buried under 15 years of development hell. And it breaks my heart. It's part of the reason why, despite my dislike of the film, I really didn't want it to fail. But that's the thing, right? Tron doesn't have the broad appeal of Star Wars or Marvel and shouldn't be treated as such. It's the third entry in a cult franchise, a very good cult franchise, but one that's proven time and time again not to have broad appeal. If you wanted a better chance at success, you should have done the Legacy sequel nostalgia play. Look at the resurgence of people giving the Disney XD animated show Tron Uprising its long overdue flowers. Look at Tron Legacy maintaining its place in the top 10 trending films on Disney+. People love this franchise. Just perhaps not as many people as Disney needs to up their bottom line. In a lot of ways, Tron is Disney's Star Trek, albeit Star Trek has broader appeal, but regardless. There's a strong, loyal fan base, but it's the kind of sci-fi that doesn't interest most people. I sincerely hope the franchise isn't retired. I mean, they have a ride in their theme park at Epcot, for God's sake, but I don't know. If it is, Disney has no one to blame but themselves. Between Leto's allegations, an overinflated budget, a subpar script to say the least, this is why you have to put your best foot forward. Don't half-ass a revival because you can. If Tron is truly dead, it's because Disney didn't properly nurture this franchise the way it deserved. The grid used to be a place where creativity and control battled for supremacy, where human ambition met digital possibility, where fathers and sons could reconcile across boundaries between worlds. Kevin Flynn told us it was supposed to be a digital frontier to reshape the human condition. Instead, we got a movie that perfectly represents the creative condition of modern Hollywood. Technically competent, aesthetically familiar, and utterly empty. Just another IP to be mined, another franchise to be managed, another movie that exists because it has to, not because it should. I wanted to love Tron Ares. I really did, but you can't love something that doesn't love itself.